So, yeah, the poles have flipped. Remember in the old world how they invested in the children, in the school system, in the university system, in the family, a lot of child-centered households, sometimes adult-centered households. Remember how the system invested in the children because they had to get them up to a certain point, and it also kept the parents who were trained in a specific area to stay rooted in one place and develop their brain. And of course, having children and having a family keeps them rooted in a specific existence. And that was the 1950s. That's why you saw all those cookie cutter homes. They wanted to develop a society that was separated based upon culture, politics, religion, and science, right? And so you saw where people gravitate towards. You saw that in the two coasts, you have the intellectual community along with the service service community. And then Middle America was a huge religious revival. And Middle America was what the movies were geared towards. Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the Freddy Krueger slasher movies and everything. So if the parents weren't around because they're off gallivanting, doing whatever, the kids were then trained by the TV and sexualized and radicalized and whatever. And then you had all the different religions and politics. And so the poles have flipped. And now you got to realize that even though the poles have flipped and we still have the same dogma of, oh, we got to invest in our kids, invest in the children, have children, invest in the children. What's happening is that parents are not invested in themselves. And so both the parents and the children destroy themselves and the grandchildren. And so when you think about it, you really can't split your affections, but people do because they're caught up in the culture and the traditions. But if you're lucky enough that you don't have any kids or you know how to develop your boundaries and all that, the parents could actually make themselves smarter by releasing a lot of the demons within. And sometimes that means that you're going to have to figure out how you're going to deal with the demons that are in your house. Why do you call them demons? Because there's always something always works against you. That's what demons are. Things that work against you. Things that compete for your attention. And so it's time to invest in the parents who already have proven that they can suffer to live. Now, suffer to die, but now could they prove that they can suffer to live? And so the last 7 years, you saw my whole journey with the J world, okay? The J juice, the J world. And every single time I went through a pain and suffering that I was allowed, myself and people around me, allowed me to release demons and to eat and to rest, I became smarter and smarter. But remember, we're going into a different world, okay? Before, certain people were given the opportunity to emphasize their brain, emphasize innovation, intellectual capacity, and other people were given an opportunity to emphasize their bodies. And so now, if you put emphasis on the body, so much on the body, it will be divided and multiplied out of existence. And that even though you might have a brain on you, which we have kids and adults who have brains on them, but their body can't support the brain. And that's the issue right now is with kids. So you have kids that are smart because they're given the tools to be smart. But we have climate change and we have people with deficiencies and buying into the sexual aesthetics that will work against them. And that it doesn't matter how great you work your brain if the body doesn't support it or doesn't have the capacity to support it. And in this point, what do parents do? They can't afford to homeschool, right? Because I don't know what the heck they're going to teach their kids if they haven't even figured it out for themselves. So they're forced to put their kids in school, and, the kids will be divided out of existence. They'll be tested to see what capacity they are in. And sometimes you just have your average run-of-the-mill kids who are going to be married off to somebody because they won't really have a future. You look at the background of the community, the family and all that. What kind of future do these kids have? Because if the parents aren't investing in themselves to support their own longevity, what chance, again, do the kids have? And so it really, truly is investing in the adults, because you can't force kids to grow up fast and take on substance and go through the pain and suffering. Only the adults who've already been down that road and maybe could choose for themselves to redirect. But then when you are paying attention to yourself, something's got to be sacrificed. Animals, children, not literally like, you do things, but you're going to have to really put the emphasis on the pain and suffering on yourself. And sometimes you have to employ others to take care of your kids. You might even have to say no to other people. No, I'm not going to watch the kid. No, I'm not going to do this because I got to take care of myself. And sometimes that's what you're going to see is some of these boomers and even Gen X say, no, I'm not watching your kid. You decided to have a child. You decided to go down that road. I got to save myself. I can't spend my life watching my own grandchildren. And people are like, oh, that's so bad. Well, at some point, somebody's got to save themselves or the whole family goes down with the ship. And so somebody's got to be the representation. And that's the thing. We have these mothers who are all sacrificing, and that was for a reason. Because when the system is ready to flip the poles, the women will be readily sacrificed. And they'll do it voluntarily, and they'll love it. And everyone around them will applaud them for it. Even the men. And it's a trip where the system is going. So that's why I said the poles have flipped. Wake up. But what does that really mean to people when you think about it? What does that mean? And so I said, in my opinion, you get your body figured out and balanced, and the brain can work amazing. And you can do whatever you literally set your mind to without wondering one day when the axe is going to fall in your immune system. And that's the thing. I have a lot of life experience behind me. Yeah, I was lucky enough to have academics shoved down my throat as a young child. And even though I rejected the traditional system, even though I tried to buy into it and reject it at the same time, I have that foundation of reading. I have that foundation of sitting at home with nobody around me and studying things voluntarily without somebody bribing me to do that. That's the thing with the bribery system. Paying kids to get good grades is then they're trained that the only time that they're going to work is if somebody gives them money to do that. Well, you realize that my husband's on the road and he does whatever he does out there to bring home the bacon. And I'm here at home. I do watch Netflix and everything, but I also exercise my brain. I also put forth some kind of work that I don't get obviously correlation equals causation paid for. This is for my own, I don't say pride because that's a sin, but I would say this is for my own development. And nobody around me is paying me for working my brain, understanding equations, understanding the logic behind numbers and theories and biology. No one's paying me to do this. Because I was trained that sometimes you just have to understand things and do it for yourself, not because someone's giving you something for it. And that's the thing with the bribery system, especially with kids and grades, is then kids don't have the impetus to do things just for themselves. They always want somebody to reward them for what they're doing. And if they don't get rewarded, then they don't do it. And that's a dangerous thing about bribery, which my mother taught me that as a kid. You don't bribe your children to get good grades. They either get good grades because they want to move forward, or they don't because there's no motivation. And how do you motivate somebody to get good grades and to stay in school? Sometimes it takes certain things to motivate people to understand stuff. And so my life, the longevity, prolonging my life is enough motivation for me to understand algebra, to understand the basics of language, to understand theories and concepts and equations and formulas and even religion and politics. The drive to stay alive has then motivated me to learn shit that I don't get paid for by anyone. because I want to learn how the world fucking works, and no one is giving me money for that. So that means that my mother's idea is that you don't bribe your kid to get good grades is fucking sound. It's right on. Because I'm sitting here and I could just be out there gallivanting, doing whatever, but no, I am developing my brain so that way I have something to offer to the world. Because that's really what humanity is geared towards. It's not just using and abusing the system, but what are you doing to advance yourself and advance the humans around you without taking more than you're contributing. And that was an amazing lesson that I just figured out. Because yeah, I could sit at home and I like I did yesterday in the afternoon, and I wanted to work those equations. I wanted to do the algebra. For some reason, I don't know why, I just wanted to do that. And that, even though there wasn't anything specific, because somebody messaged me and said, hey, this doesn't equal this. I'm like, yeah, I know, it says approximate. And it had me look at, when you're looking at math and logic and algebra, and you can work things linear and nonlinear and all that stuff. And even though I didn't have a readily developed problem, I just put, equations on each side of the equal sign and then worked them out and then said it doesn't really equal because, yeah, 2 equals 2, right? But when you have something like 33 equals 5.8, well, no, it's approximate. But that's the thing, is that what do you mean approximate? It's not equal. I mean, you could put not equal, or you can say approximate because maybe there is a square root. But that's all the number logic, the formulas, and then what are you trying to convey through that? And so it's advanced ways of hybridizing and merging everything that's been compartmentalized in science and biology and math and allegory and all that, and finding a story to tell, to then give people a way to apply math to their own life when they look at their lifestyle. Okay? And so when you figure out that they invested so much in children a long time ago when the slower frequency, so they gave all the kids, access to information, but some people had the biology to make connections, and they also had the nurture, they had the family, they had the resources at their disposal to really develop stuff. And sometimes if you're in Silicon Valley, right, and you're in the gifted and talented program, then you have the GATE program and the AP, advanced stuff, versus remedial or average. And so that's how the system picked out the ones that were going to take science and engineering and other things further. But now they have pretty much the formulas, they have what they need and all that stuff. And even they've seen what happens when women and men and all that buy into certain lifestyles and belief systems. They actually divide themselves out of existence. And so when you're taking the old world and applying the same concepts of the old world into the new world, people divide themselves out of existence faster. And so the system made it the other way around, so that way they can utilize you for at least first 50 years. So here's the thing. In my opinion, you get your body figured out and balanced, and then the brain can work amazing, and you can do whatever you literally set your mind to without wondering one day when the axe is going to fall in your immune system. The system made it the other way around, so that way they can utilize you for at least your first 50 years, and then you start declining before 50, and then you get the best out of you when you're young, and then justify when you pass away later. So that's why you have to understand the adults have a better chance, if they can handle pain and suffering, to survive this versus their kids who've already been programmed to have that fear of missing out, or they just don't have the capacity to deal with the pain and suffering. So which is why they say the future is the children, but what kind of future are you looking at, which is relative to the kind of children you're raising and what they're focusing on and issues they hold within. And so the real future are the adults who can get their body right so they can work their mind correctly and logically relative to their intention. The adults have already suffered, and they survived their childhood and even fucked up marriages and whatever else, and they have the life experience that no child will ever have, because the children have to earn life experience, assuming they survive it. And so how many of you know your kids are going to go down the same road? They're already in relationships, already having sex, and they're probably going to have a bunch of babies. You think they're going to survive. You can probably see the writing on the wall when you look at mathematically what's going on when women divide themselves out of existence. or multiply themselves out of existence. When men do that, and then are saddled with a kid, they have to pay child support, having to work so hard to pay child support, or having to raise that child and have that kid take so much from them. And so many adults have the capacity to suffer to live, but what will they eventually turn into? And will they be able to withstand and handle the transition based upon Mother Nature? And people who have been in culture and very rigid belief systems will have an issue with biologically changing based upon Mother Nature. She was always a woman. And so this thing about what is X? X is X. X, woman was the foundation. The Y, again, was the mutation. And the Y chromosome was the antibodies as a protector, and it was as a predator relative to how much and how many. And that's why you see the system is trying to now cut down all the men. Because if we have more men than women, guess what's going to happen? All out extinction. And so then the system has to go and keep the balance. That's why they did the experiments. That's why a lot of these girls have a lot of boys, and that's going to be her own extinction. Unless she finds a way to bridge that gap. Fill in the holes. And so now the system is like, okay, we've got to have a balance of these hormones. Because yes, the hypothalamus, the pituitary gland, the axis of the immune system, how much stress it's under, determines, gender. It determines the kind of diseases she'll have to deal with. And so women lose her intellectual capacity when they start having many children. And I don't care if there are women who have a billion, I don't care if there are women who have a billion kids and they were great thinkers. I don't remember any one of the past, especially in the Middle Ages, who were great thinkers with a slew of children. That's how women have been controlled, was through her family, was through her having a bunch of kids. And that's why a lot of men out there are great thinkers. I'm not saying women weren't, but when you think about it, the Middle Ages, while the women were at home, either a broad mare and developing a bunch of children or family, or she was a courtesan in the Middle Ages, maybe allowed to have some intellectual capacity to compete wittingly with the guys. But it was the men that were at home working on their projects like Newton, like Copernicus, like Kepler, like all these great physicists, Einstein, okay? And so I see women adopt children and they're great thinkers, but when you actually bear children, you lose intellectual capacity. Josephine Baker wasn't a great thinker. Now, she was back in the 1930s and she was doing nudity in these clubs. Wasn't a great thinker, but she was the first one who was able to really use her body as a platform for money. And then she was also a spy and an activist, right? But also adopted a bunch of children, but women using her body to get ahead. Why are we using women as prostitution and baby makers and spies? Because, she was used as a spy during World War II or World War I, one of those two. And so, yes, we needed women to have the men to be great thinkers. Now it's time for the women to become great thinkers, but not be compromised so early on or even later on. That's why I'm saying, if you're making your girls go get pregnant and have a bunch of children, you're screwing, or you're literally screwing your own kids by forcing them into these old institutions. And if you're not giving her, food and air and water and helping her understand the use of food and air and water, then she will be diminished out of existence. And why must she become a nun in order to be influential? Why must women be slaves to the system? Why don't we give her the freedom to think without being saddled with taking care of everybody? And so by this point, we have a lot of girls who don't have enough body to them to support the potential for their brain because they've been sexualized so much, and her mother has been sexualized so much that they lose intellectual capacity. And so some cultures have women who will surpass other cultures of women because they have enough body early on to support them. But will they survive climate change? And will the body hold up to the astronomical taxing of the brain and the system using that person until they're done? So again, these 17-year-olds that have PhDs, yes, they have enough body. Okay. And yes, they are Black, maybe out of Chicago, but how long will that last? And remember, the immune system keeps doing what it has to do in order to survive climate change. And she's going to be around a lot of diverse people. And she'll be cured up to a certain point until the body can't be cured anymore. And then she will suffer some kind of disease and be done. But the system used her for something. Okay? And so the universal positive is all the food. The universal negative is climate change and particle acceleration. And so, people have these theories of what positive and negative is. They're like, oh, what's positive? All the love, love, love. No, that's sex and reproduce. That's sex. That's dying and reproducing is all the love, love, love bullshit. Living off oxytocin. That's loving animals and children and saving everything under the sun. The universal positive is all the food, meat, milk, cheese, eggs, fruits, vegetables, everything. The universal negative is climate change and particle acceleration. People's lifestyles, belief systems, and deficiencies are the variables and the factors people don't even take into account. All right? Now look at what your issues are and what your deficiencies are, and you'll see some people will not make it, and neither will their children. We have people who can't handle food, and they don't understand how aggressive the environment is. And every single time a woman has a child, she diminishes her own immune system exponentially. Which is why men have it so good, and if they are built like a brick shit house, because they have longevity, and sometimes they even have intellectual capacity if they're trained in the right direction. That's why I always wanted to be a man, because they had it fucking good back then, and I had to deal with my PMS and the evolution, and it was fucking hell. And I wasn't going to be on drugs. I wasn't, that wasn't where I couldn't afford it, really, when you think about it. And women must compete harder because they're told to have children, and they're starving themselves out of existence so they can fit in sexually to the population. And they're always taking care of animals and children and everyone else, competing for her attention. And so she dies as a human sacrifice. Now look at your friends and family and what they're focusing on and what they're training their kids to do. Save the animals, save the children, and be a sexual plaything for somebody else. Or go to school and be a smart sexual plaything type of thing. And women are not told to think. They're told to have sex, have a bunch of kids, and be the all-loving Gaia mother who screws everything around her. And she even screws herself because she doesn't know any better. And everyone applauds her for screwing herself in the world. They love a human sacrifice. They love watching her suffer. And she's it. And she embraces that role because she gets so much social capital. She gets all the sympathy and the friends and family and all the love and all the adoration. That's why women don't want to change, because they have been sucked into that validation system. Everyone hates a thinking woman, and thinking women get denigrated by their own society. But everyone loves a sexual mother out there who will screw everything, taking care of children and animals and everything that's indefensible, right? Everyone loves an MILF, a mom I like to FUCK. American Pie told you that. And how many people love that movie series, American Pie? And it was made for Americans, right? And if she stops having sex or kids, then she's giving everyone drugs to have sex and have kids. How many elderly women are herbal salesmen? So what is the role of women who doesn't have sex or kids and is not giving everyone drugs and alcohol? Oh my gosh. Maybe she might use her fucking brain. Oh my God. But God forbid, because men have such issues with competition, and her peers hate anyone who thinks differently, and so her peers string her up and destroy her from within if she lets them. So then girls are relegated to just screwing themselves in the world because they have no other choice. People around them are vipers. Women could be the Antichrist, especially when she doesn't realize what she has been forced into. Okay? So exponents are how many people are in a family and how much that's going to dilute the potential longevity and resources to close the gap. So 3 to the third power is 27. 3 times 3 times 3. 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27. This is how fast things multiply in families and in immune systems. Particle acceleration does that. And so when you have so much growth, exponential growth in the body, in the family, that dilutes that family. Oh yeah, you might think, safety and strength in numbers. Not necessarily. Because what are those numbers doing? They're cannibalizing each other. There's so much division and multiplication going on that's why the system is saying, okay, when you have so many people, eventually that's going to be called extinction. That's universe 25. When you allow things to replicate and reproduce so quickly with no predators, with nothing to regulate, it becomes extinction. And that's what's going on. Oh, I got to blow my nose. So no, I'm not impressed with your children. No, I'm not impressed with you having a bunch of kids. Those poor fucking children. Every equation is a factor of what makes up specific biological entities and take into account all the internal and external environments. That's why integers are so important, so you understand positive and negative, and you can theoretically use the allegory of what is positive and negative, and people make up their own ideas thinking that one thing is negative, one thing is positive, but you have to understand at the micro level, not at the allegorical level. We have women who think love, love, love is so positive, which, yeah, I guess, but it also becomes very negative because you're dying and reproducing. And toxic, no different than killing all the life in your body using oncology and whatever else. Negative is good on some level, but people abuse negativity and they destroy themselves. What's negativity? Oncology. All the antibiotics. And so the equal sign and the approximation sign tells you whether or not how close two objects are equal to each other based upon the factors in play. And you can't have things that are completely equal. That's called equilibrium. That's death. So you want to have a little bit of inequality so that way there is evolution and allowance for change. But how far off the mark are you? And if there's a number is bigger on this side, it's going to cannibalize this side. Number small on this side, it'll get cannibalized. And so you want to have a relative equilibrium, but you don't want to be totally equal, or then it's all out annihilation. All right. And so sometimes you have to solve for X. Sometimes you have to see how close you are to equality, but you want to be too equal because you want to give room for evolution. And every number is a representation of something that holds a type of value, and even the symbols represent how fast or how slow that value is added or subtracted to that specific entity. While the numbers do not have any kind of representation that would make sense as far as correlation equals causation, you could see what the system is trying to do, solving problems that they have to look for the missing link or the variable. Okay? And so that's basically algebra. All right, adding and subtracting things here and things there. I mean, I'm not gonna read all of this, but that's kind of the issue that we're in, is that people don't understand how numbers and all of that correlate to then the variables. And so everything is in numbers. Men and women and families divide themselves out of existence. Math doesn't lie. People will tell you their truths, but math is very concrete. And so if you can't apply math to what is going on biologically, then you will divide yourself out of existence and blame somebody else. And people are by their own hand, through their dogmatic principles. And so at this point, I really could care less, because no matter how much evidence you provide people, they will find a way to cancel your information out based upon the allegory they have bought into a long time ago. All right? When you're being tempted by the cute dogs and being told sob stories about this dog and that shelter and this dog, people are like, oh my God, I got to go save that. No, you're not saving it. You're just going to watch it die and be the contribution to that. But it's suffering. So yeah, you know how you end suffering? You kill it. That's how you end suffering. Oh no, we can't do that either. So yeah, people are screwed. They bought into a storyline that they can never win. And they'll end up suffering along with everything else out there. And the only time to stop suffering is to let things just die. That's how you end suffering. And so when you feel you have to save the world and you are saving everything under the sun, like animals, women, and babies and children, not only are you physical and biological and immunological hoarder, but you will also be cannibalized by everything you're trying to save. You can't save these animals. You can't save the children. You can't even save your friends' fucking family. But you possibly save yourself. And if you know you have the capacity to, because you have access to air, food, and water, and there's not too much competition around you competing for your time, you might have a fucking chance. You might have a chance. Just look at the people who hoard animals in their house. The animals are suffering. They're suffering, and so is their community. Then the law has to step in and regulate that population. So those who are in love with saving everything under the sun, bye! There's no way you can pay attention to yourself to become whole again, because you have politicized even your own existence to the point where you can't get ahead. And tempting other people to save things when you know you can't fucking save anything, really. Why would you be a party to somebody else's destruction? That's why I don't go post animals on Facebook, say, oh, you should save this. Oh, look, this is a no-kill shelter. You should save all these. Yeah, okay. You still bought into the destruction of animals and humans and yourself through saviorship. And so, yeah, solving for X. I mean, this is so complex that I know this goes over so many different people's heads. People don't even get this. But yeah, when you think about hold on, people need all food, and that's all the positives. And then the universal negative is climate change. And so when you think about it, when you're taking food away and you're having a bunch of babies and you're out there gallivanting, taking on microbes, and you're trying to save everything under the sun, that's so many negatives working against the positive, you'll be done. That's called aggressive entropy. I mean, I simplified it. And again, people's lifestyles and belief systems and deficiencies are the variables. So we have concrete evidence that you need food. And we have concrete evidence we're in climate change. And the heat will cause particle acceleration and causing the entropy process to accelerate, plus all that multiplication of microbes like cancer will cause someone's to go even more behind the eight ball. And so when you have those two concrete universal positive and universal negatives, then you got to factor in all the lifestyles and belief systems and deficiencies. And yeah. And that's logic, mathematical thinking. When you can actually simplify to that extent. Because yes, you need all food. That's a positive, regardless of how you want to characterize the food. Because yes, there are some foods that are very highly negative. But overall, food is the positive that your body needs. And it goes through its positive, negative reinforcement back and forth. But that's what people need. Is they need meat, milk, cheese, eggs. They need all of that. And then we have entropy, thermodynamics, heat. How does heat transfer? What happens when heat loses its energy and life force because it's being converted so much all the time? And that's through the family. When you have a bunch of babies, you're converting yourself out of existence. You're losing energy. You're losing intellectual capacity. But again, that's physics. How many people out there who don't even have the capacity to understand physics? They can't even fucking get it, and they don't want to. So I just do this for my own professional and personal development. I don't get paid for this shit, but I love learning. And so Gen X, Y, and Z, 3D printing of the future. So you have the Y-axis, the X-axis, and this is, in geometry and coordinates and the integers and all that. And you have the Z-axis, that's the 3D side of it, which is really interesting how it corresponds to the generations, X, Y, and Z. Oh my God. All right. And so I proved that as far as geometry. And I'm watching also a really funny series. Oh my God. That guy, Ron Livingston, remember him in Office Space? And he played that dude that was just kind of like apathetic and completely just done with society. And he plays kind of the same character, but he's an ex-alcoholic and he's a janitor and he's and he runs a group of ex-alcoholics who are such funny characters. Oh my God, I laugh like my gosh. So if you want to laugh and you want to kind of take, bring a little levity into your world, watch Loudermilk. It is funny as hell. And I like watching Ron Livingston. He's really good. And so I've been watching that and just, kind of laughing at humanity because just the characters they play. And so that's kind of the joy of indefinite life, potential immortality, is that you can still build your brain, enjoy the world, and also offer people something else to think about. And it's a great diversity. It's great diversification of your brain. And so, yesterday I was just developing equations to learn. Because it's been a while since I've done all this algebra stuff. So I had to remind myself and refresh on certain things. And again, someone messaged me, asked me, well, this doesn't mean this. And yeah, you're right. This isn't equal to each other, but I want to just put an equation down and just figure out. And so I did the whole solving for X. That's one side of it. Okay. But then the whole equal sign, where the person actually circled some of the things. He said, this isn't equal to this. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And that's why I said approximation, but I didn't put that as an actual lead in. So you understand what the actual problem was or what solution was I looking for. Cause I didn't really know. I just put things down And then I figured out what the problem was. I had the solution, okay, it's not equal or approximate or not equal or approximation, or is it the square root? I mean, I don't know if that's a rule that every single time you do when you do these equations and they're like not equal or approximate, and then you do the square root, is it always going to be like kind of close to the square root? Square root is like of 2 is like 1.41, so it's not totally equal. But that's what square root is you're getting as close as you can, but it's not completely going to be equal, because nothing ever is when you think about it. I mean, and so the square root of 2 has the approximate value of 1.4121356. It was the first number shown to be what is known as an irrational number, a number that can't be written in the form of AB, where both A and B are integers. Okay? And so that's crazy. And so when you're working with whole numbers, plus or minus, what's the margin of error we're looking for? We can see how far off the mark we are. And of course, there's a lot more rules that go, but this is a way of thinking. This is a way of taking your brain in a different direction. And that's the thing about thinking, is how do you guide your brain in different ways of thinking? Or some people are just black and white. It's good or bad based upon the allegory and the religion that they belong to. Fine. That's a lot of the religious people out there. That's a lot of the political people out there. That's a lot of scientific people out there. Everything is black and white, and there's no gray area. But what if there was gray areas that they could buy into? And so, yeah. So there's that. And again, I don't care what sexuality, whatever, by the X and Y chromosome, they're going to be hybridized to the point where you have a human that will hold both the X and Y, and they're not so extreme on each end, and that will probably strengthen the human race. And then the system will develop the humans in another way, and the whole J world, if men can handle transitioning to a woman on some level and go through that process. But how many men who are way to the testosterone are they going to want to embrace estrogen? Well, yeah. So, I mean, I'm pretty much said what I needed to say about this, X and Y and all that. We'll see what happens. People are going to try to fight for their culture, fight for their lifestyle, fight for their belief system. But when you fight so hard and you resist evolution, resist change, you'll end up destroying your culture anyways. Evolution really is the only way to survive longevity. If not, then you will fight for something that is going to be destroyed anyways. So you might as well evolve or die with your culture. I mean, it's up to you. All right. So that's all I'm going to say. Bye. I don't know what else is there really to say, but bye.